He is a never shall.
Celebrate. Today it's the higher martyr Eusebius, but I hope that I know, that he will understand if I dedicate a little bit of time here today to talking about the 250th anniversary of our country's existence. A beautiful place. As St. Nicholas Velimirovich said, a beautiful God's country. It's important that we love this country. As I saw Father Josiah Trenham say with a clip recently, you can't save what you can't love. How can you save something you don't love? Why would you even bother? And indeed, I have come across this attitude in Orthodoxy many times. Countless times through the years, I've encountered the attitude that this place isn't worth saving. And indeed, people have the attitude of, why bother? Some people would quote to me the Father Seraphim Rose quote of yesterday in Russia, today in Russia, tomorrow in America. And they would say it as though they were looking forward to it, like we have it coming or something. To quote another great man, we've all got it coming. The issue is, what are we going to do with the time that we're here? The issue is, are we fatalists? Do we think that because we've all got it coming, as Christ said, even if you call your brother a fool, you're worthy of hellfire, Jesus said. So we've all got not only death, but hell coming to us, except for Jesus Christ. And there's nobody that doesn't fall into that category. So it's something to keep in mind. But I have encountered this attitude, a disdainful, uncaring attitude towards this country. I've encountered it many times. So many times that I'll probably just keep talking about it until then, so that I can try to ensure that the attitude doesn't spread at least beyond a conversation with me. It's an unworthy attitude. It's an unchristian thing to look at your fatherland and look at your homeland, whether it's your fatherland or the land of your choice, to look at it and say, boy, this place could use a little bit of communist revolution. Boy, this place could use a little theocratic tyranny, depending on which flavor of person that you're talking about. But instead, we should have the attitude of respect. Great respect and love. Love for our forefathers. Love and thankfulness to the condescending providence of our God that brought them here. We should give thanks every day for not only the gift from God of the Orthodox Church, the greatest gift, the pearl, but also the gift of this country, without which none of us would have known about Orthodoxy. I saw somebody say, this is what happens when you give Europeans 200 years to build a country, this random X account said. And I didn't say, because I didn't want to, fire up the passions and stuff like that, but what I held myself back from saying is, no, this is what happens when an extremely small, self-selecting, very distinct group of Europeans put their minds to building a country. And it's very different. How do I know that? Because it's very different from what we see across the Atlantic Ocean, where they continue to tear each other apart. The people who came here are the people who were tired of being there. Or who were told or made known in no uncertain terms they were no longer welcome there. That's our ancestors. And that's our forebears in the church as well. Running for their lives across the entire world. That's the history of our country and of our church and of our specifically our jurisdiction. Knows it better than just about any group that's ever come to this country. I think if I look back and I think, okay, it's true there were some Puritans being killed. It's true there was definitely a lot of blood in the streets during the wars of religion in our country, the countries of our forefathers' origins. But very few people, too few people remember those things. Too often I hear also of, well, it's the fruit of the Enlightenment. It's the fruit of the poison tree, therefore. And it's not worthy of our respect, and it's not possible for it to become whatever. I don't know. People, they go far down this line of reasoning. Oh, all the founding fathers were Masons. That's not true. They weren't all Masons. But what does it even mean to be a Mason? Do people even know what they say when they say that? What they're saying? Or are they just parroting the things that they've heard? Why does Freemasonry exist as we understand it today? And this is not an advocation for Freemasonry. It exists for the same reasons that I just talked about. The wars of religion, blood in the streets between Catholics and Protestants. So much so that honest men couldn't transact business day to day. So you look at the rules that the Masons have, and they don't talk about religion and they don't talk about politics. The only thing they agree, depending on the branch, is you have to believe in some sort of a God. And again, I'm not advocating for Freemasonry, but have we no sympathy for our ancestors whatsoever? Have we no knowledge of the struggles that they went through with zero knowledge of the Orthodox Church? None at all. The average layperson in Western Europe had no choice in the matter. He couldn't say, without fear of being burned at the stake or hung or quartered or flayed alive. A Protestant under Queen Mary in England took his life in his hands if he admitted what he believed. And a Catholic under Queen Elizabeth, her sister, faced the same kind of punishment. And those are our ancestors. And the people who came here, the first batches of people that came here are people whose fathers and grandfathers had fought in Oliver Cromwell's army. People who had this raised, like I was raised with the stories of the new martyrs, these people were raised with the stories of Cranmer being burnt at the stake for translating the Bible to English or whatever. And I'm sure that's not exactly what it was. John Peter will correct me later about that. But burnt at the stake. People were burnt at the stake for being Protestants, for being Catholics, for being lots of things. People were violently killed in those times. And so in order to save their lives, to raise their families in peace, and teach them the way they believed they should be taught, our ancestors came here. Including our spiritual ancestors, the founders of the Russian Orthodox Church outside Russia, their immediate descendants, and we now have the headquarters of our jurisdiction in New York City. And we hold and continue to teach the importance of holding on to the true faith. But if some of the people who were around in the world at the time when this country was founded had done things the way that everyone had always done them from time immemorial, we would not know about Orthodoxy. It would be outlawed in favor of Anglicanism. Or perhaps depending on the state that you live in. Perhaps if you're in Maryland, it's the only, maybe Maryland would be the only state you're allowed to be a Catholic in. Who knows how things could have turned out? There's lots of ways things could have turned out that they didn't, due to the overwhelming providence of God. As we look back at our history, as we look back at the last 250 years, which is really nothing. It's really the blink of an eye. Today's martyr, St. Eusebius, the Higher martyr, he died in the 4th century, early 4th century, I think I saw. And that's 300 years or so after the birth of Christ. And that's 50 years or so longer than this country's been around. But still, that same Roman Empire would exist as a political entity for another 1,000 years after that, until it finally fell in 1453. And even then, it took another 400 years, really, until now. There's still people who think, well, 100 years ago at least, certainly, there were still people who thought of themselves as Romans first, before they thought of themselves as Greeks or whatever. And today, even in some parts of the world, when people talk about the Greek Orthodox Church, they'll say the Roman Orthodox Church. And so who knows what's in store, what God has in store for us for the next 250 or 750. But we know that the country is becoming more Orthodox, not less Orthodox. I mentioned in a couple other sermons before that we have met the Episcopalians going the other direction. Their numbers are dwindling, our numbers are rising, and right now we've got about the same numbers in this country. That was not the case when I was a kid. And it won't be the case if we don't hold on to it. It won't remain the case. We'll just become another sort of, well, who knows what. Hell will not prevail against the church. We know that. But we also know from our own history, again, the living history of Rocco, we know that God will withdraw his hand if his people reject him. That's what happened in Russia. That's what happened in Israel, in the Old Testament. It happened we've seen it many times in history. For the sake of salvation of the whole world, for the sake of our instruction, the instruction of later, the cautionary instruction of later generations, God allows us to experience the consequences of our choices. And so, we should not take what we've been given for granted, or think that it advances only while we sit around and just enjoy watching. Of course, there are times when we can stand still and see the wonderful works of God. But it pleases Him to work through His people. Each of us, the members of His body, have a role to play in the continued advancement of the church in this country. Holy Apostles is going to be 25 years old next week. And that will be about that's half of the amount of time that my mom and dad were married. If my father had lived until December, it would have been their 50th anniversary. That's 1/5 of the time that the country's been. And so our church, this very little parish here, has been around for 1/10 of the life of the entire country. And maybe if this parish can be spared, if those of us who are members of the body here can increase our prayer, increase our trust in God, increase our devotion, remembering the example of Father George, and just give a little more and ask, what can I do? The Holy Apostles, what can I do with the power that I've been given by God as a member of His body? What can I do for my neighbors, for my country? And we find, when we synthesize all the things we know to be true, we know that the Orthodox Church is the true faith. We know that the Church is the body of Christ. We know that hell will not prevail against it. When we synthesize all these things together, we know, for example, that we can move mountains with prayer. What can we not achieve? How long will it take us with the proper attitude to move to the next step of this parish? How long will it take us to, with the proper attitude, with the proper thankfulness to God, humility before the throne and prayer, how long will it take us to make America Orthodox? That should be our prayer to God. That should be a question for ourselves every day. What we can do with our family. What kind of example are we going to show to our neighbors? What are we going to teach our children? And will we be remembered? Will our names be remembered in the story like Saint Vladimir, or like Aharamata Eusebius, or like the Holy Apostles? Will our names be remembered in the story of how America became holy? Amen. The blessing of the Lord be upon you through His grace and love for mankind, always and ever, and unto the age of the age.